Hello everyone, this is Jacqueline Weaver, and I will be discussing climate change and its impacts on the Alaska Native subsistence lifestyle. Climate change is affecting everyone and will have an even greater effect in the years to come, which will be more observable in Alaska as well as other areas in the Arctic. In recent years, Alaska has had the warmest temperature on record for the state. So what does this mean for subsistence activities? Global warming is not just an increase in temperatures in one area, it is an increase of the overall temperature of the planet. This change affects areas differently. Most of these areas will experience an increase in the average temperature, however, some areas will have cooler temperatures. The varying temperatures will also be more extreme, so the people in these areas will experience higher summer temperatures and lower winter temperatures. Some people in these areas, like these, are the Alaska Native peoples. The overall warming of the planet spells out doom for animals relying on sea ice or places with cooler temperatures. Not only are the warming temperatures melting the sea ice, they are also warming the oceans. And the warmer the oceans are, the more likely they will be able to absorb more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. The animals that live in these areas who are used to the cooler temperatures will have to move and find new habitats or evolve fast enough to cope. This means death for animals like coral, who only grow a little over 3 inches in a year. Their last hope is their offspring, and that they may find cooler waters and thrive there. These corals have a symbiotic relationship with algae, meaning a place to stay for the algae if it is willing to give food to the coral from photosynthesis. When water temperature rises, causing the waters to become more productive, it prevents light from reaching the algae. So the algae which prefer cooler temperatures will then leave because of obstructed light in the coral. Since the ocean does absorb more carbon dioxide than it releases, it has been termed the Earth's carbon sink. But where does all this absorbed CO2 end up? It is dissolved into the ocean, but when this carbon dioxide is dissolved, the pH of the ocean increases, meaning that the water becomes more acidic. This acidic water dissolves minerals like calcium, which submarine animals like snails, clams, mussels, or oysters use to make their shells. These animal shells are dissolving in waters they call home. This can have an impact on Alaska Native communities that forage for clams, mussels, and the like. Since these animals will have less protection because of thinner shells, they will most likely get eaten more easily and are more vulnerable to diseases. As animals transition from warming waters to cooler water, they will encounter other animals that were never part of their previous food chain. This can be good for bigger predatory animals who will have an easier time finding a meal, but mean disaster for animals or plants that are not used to defending against this new predator. Situations like this can affect subsistence animals like salmon, especially if the new predators that are arriving are ones the fish are not yet wary of. Sockeye salmon traditionally spent 2 years in their birth lake or stream before going out to sea. However, due to warming temperatures, these bodies of water have more favorable conditions, which allow for a higher productivity rate. This means the salmon have much more food to eat than before. As a result, they grow much faster. These fish are growing so much faster that they are only spending 1 year in their birth lake or stream before they leave for the ocean. This could impact the resiliency of the sockeye salmon. In the past, when these salmon left for the ocean, they would leave at different ages. However, now most fish are leaving after 1 year, which could devastate an entire age class of fish. If you're fishing for sockeye salmon as a subsistence activity and an entire age class is affected, it could mean a year without salmon. For people who rely on subsistence activities for their food supply, this could be devastating. Another Alaskan animal being impacted by climate change is the caribou. Climate change can lead to an increase in wildfires in the Alaska boreal forest. These fires kill the food necessary for the caribou's winter survival. During the winter months, food is scarce. However, caribou have found an alternative to leaves and grasses, lichen. These lichen grow very slowly in black spruce stands in forests that are more than 80 years old. In the future, when these wildfires are more prevalent, caribou will have a harder time finding lichen, meaning they will have to travel further from their usual routes. If these animals are traveling away from where they ate lichen in the past and are finding new habitats, it means that the people who use these animals for subsistence hunting will have to either follow them further or give up on them as a subsistence food. Because of climate change, heavier snowfall in some areas means caribou will have to change their migration patterns further, affecting subsistence hunters. Another animal impacted by the forest fire is the moose. However, wildfires seem to have the opposite of impact. than the one that they have on the caribou. Since moose prefer to eat young saplings and grasses, these freshly burned areas make great feeding areas for moose. So while the caribou population will be migrating further away from their old stomping grounds, the moose population will increase. This is a positive for subsistence hunters because even if there are less caribou, they may be able to make up the difference with a moose as a subsistence food. For some Alaska Native subsistence hunters, the season of hunting began in June, but that was 50 years ago. Today it starts 2 months earlier, in April, because of climate change. One Inupiat man compares the warming temperatures and climate change to like putting him on another planet. Because of the increase in wildfires due to climate change, the fallen trees can make a challenge for trappers, and aquatic plants that grow better in warmer waters are spreading. These plants can hinder passage of boats through lakes. These rivers, lakes, and streams are not freezing until months after when they're used to. Because of Native Alaska communities are very closely connected to the environment for their subsistence needs, many small effects of climate change can have a large impact on them. Lakes and streams not freezing over, which can disrupt travel plans, or if the source of drinking water becomes contaminated, you would no longer be able to retrieve water from that area. Another thing that is impacting Alaska Natives that live in rural communities is erosion. The people of these communities are worried that artifacts as well as their heritage will wash out into the ocean. Some of the poorest Alaska Native communities are the villages that are furthest away from civilization. There are also the villages that experience the greatest impact of climate change, particularly the village on the northern coast of Alaska. Over the past 60 years, the average temperature across Alaska has increased by 3 degrees Fahrenheit, which is double what the rest of the United States has seen. Lakes are getting smaller in the southern part of Alaska, and this shrinkage is largely due to evaporation caused by warming temperatures, permafrost thaw, and a greater accumulation of decomposing plant material. These shrinking lakes are a problem for subsistence hunters, because the population of fish found in these areas are declining, which means less food. Another similar problem is permafrost thawing. Since the winters are not getting as cold as they used to, the permafrost does not expand as much, which means more and more thaws every year. This can result in things like road damage due to parts of the ground thawing out beneath the road's surface. This can impact travel for planes landing on runways and cars using roads for travel. Hunting animals that can only be caught in or around sea ice has become increasingly more difficult. For Alaska Native communities that rely on whales as a large part of their diet, the process of hunting them has become a hardship. Not only do they have to wait longer into the year for the sea ice to freeze, they have to find a spot of ice thick enough to pull a whale up onto, that will last long enough for them to harvest the blubber, meat, and any other usable part of the animal. It is harder for the Alaska Natives to get to the areas that the seals use for breathing holes in the sea ice. These seals also have to adapt. The mothers were used to digging a burrow for the baby seal to hide in above the ice. However, since the ice is now extremely thin and not deep enough for a burrow, the baby is exposed to predators like polar bears. These polar bears are also having a harder time finding food, meaning that they have to travel further, which can use up precious fat reserves. In conclusion, time needs to be taken to think of ways to help preserve the traditions of the Alaska Native people. This means finding ways to adapt to the changing environment, writing down stories from Alaska Native elders so their descendants will have a history to look to and appreciate as part of their life and their people. Since the sockeye salmon are leaving their birth lakes and streams a year early, people will have to learn to adjust to how these animals are adapting to the changing world. The caribou are learning to migrate further and are taking different routes to get their winter foods. If the Alaska Natives want to continue their subsistence practices, they too will have to learn to adapt to their changing food sources. Protecting the planet and the people, plants, and animals that live on it is very important. If we do not change the way we are living now in order to prevent further pollution of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, there will be nothing we can do to stop the changing environment. The only other option would be to adapt with the animals and plants. The Alaska Native way of life is very important for the Native people of Alaska. For them, carrying on their age-old traditions of subsistence hunting, fishing, and gathering defines them as a person as a people. For the Alaska Native people, hunting is a rite of passage in some cases. If one is not able to retrieve the desired animals for their village, they will feel great shame. Climate change can have a negative impact on the social structure. Since animals are having to migrate further away to find the conditions that they desire, Alaska Native people will have to learn to adapt to their changing environment as well as how the animals are making changes to cope with climate change. Thanks for watching, and here are my reference slides.